"Sir, hide me under the hay before the riders reach the gate," she gasped. The pitchfork was already in my hand when she came over the rise. I don't know why I remember that first, the pitchfork, not her. Maybe because I'd been working the loft since before sunup and my arms ached and I was thinking about nothing but getting the last of that hay turned before the heat came full. A man does a thing long enough, the thing is all there is. That's how I'd lived for a good many years. One task, then the next. Don't look too far ahead. Don't look back at all. She came across the south pasture at a run. Not a woman running for exercise run. Not even a woman running scared run. This was a run that said she'd been running for a while and her legs were starting to make promises her lungs couldn't keep. She had a canvas bag thrown over one shoulder, hitched up under her arm so it wouldn't swing and slow her down. Smart. That told me something right there. She saw me in the loft door and she didn't hesitate. Most people, they see a stranger in a barn door, they slow down. They calculate. They wonder if the stranger is one more thing to be afraid of. She didn't do that. She came straight to me, right up to the base of the loft ladder, and she looked up with those dark eyes and she said it plain. "Sir, hide me under the hay before the riders reach the gate." She was gasping it, yes, but she wasn't begging. There's a difference. Begging is when a person has already given up some part of themselves. What she was doing was asking one stranger to make a fast decision, and she was doing it straight. No tears, no theater, just the fact of the thing. I looked past her south, toward the tree line. 3 riders, maybe a quarter mile, coming at a canter, not a full run, men who knew where they were going and weren't in a hurry because they figured they had her already. I looked back down at her. "Get up here," I said. She was up that ladder before I finished the sentence. I'd been working the far corner of the loft, which meant there was a good 4 feet of loose hay piled along the east wall. I pointed at it. She crawled in without a word, pulled herself deep, and I used the pitchfork to push the rest over her until there was nothing to see but hay. I tossed the fork into the corner casual-like, walked to the loft door, sat down on the edge of it with my legs hanging over, and started rolling a cigarette. I heard the riders come through the gate about 2 minutes later. There were 3 of them, like I'd counted. 2 were younger, the kind of young men who hire on with someone else's meanness because they don't have enough of their own to go anywhere. The third was older, heavy in the saddle. He had a face that looked like it had been pressed between 2 flat rocks when he was born and never quite recovered. He pulled up below me. "You seen a woman come through here?" "What kind of woman?" I said. I was still working on the cigarette. "Mexican, dark hair, bag over her shoulder, running." "Huh," I said. I licked the paper. "When?" "Just now, last 10 minutes. I looked out across the pasture like I was thinking about it. "Had a coyote come through about 20 minutes back," I said. "Mangy thing, went east toward the creek." He stared at me. He had the kind of eyes that were always doing arithmetic, adding up what he knew against what he was being told, looking for where the numbers didn't match. "She's a runaway," he said. "Property of Don Esteban Ruiz. We're authorized to bring her back." I took my time lighting the cigarette, shook the match out slow. "Didn't see any woman," I said. He held on me a moment longer. I looked back at him the way I'd learned to look at men like him over the years, not hard, not soft, just steady. A man who has nothing to prove tends to look at people that way. It either settles them down or it makes them nervous. Either one is fine with me. He turned his horse without another word. The 2 younger ones followed. I watched them ride east toward the creek like I'd pointed them. I finished the cigarette. After a while I said, without turning around, "They're gone." There was some rustling, and then she came up out of the hay like something surfacing from water. She had bits of straw in her hair and she was breathing hard, but her hands were steady when she brushed herself off. "Thank you," she said. Her English was good, better than mine on some days. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "They'll be back when they don't find anything at the creek. You've got maybe an hour." She nodded. She already knew that. Her name was Celia. I found that out later, not right then. Right then we didn't have time for names. I got her down from the loft and into the house, which was a modest operation, 2 rooms, a kitchen with a wood stove, a back bedroom with a bed I'd built myself out of pine. I'd been running this place alone for going on 3 years. 80 acres, a small herd, a good well. Nobody's idea of a kingdom but mine. I gave her water and sat down across from her and said, "Tell me." She told me. Her family had worked for the Ruiz operation for 2 generations, south of the border in the old ranching country, where the land still ran big and the old families ran bigger. Don Esteban Ruiz was the kind of man who thought that because his grandfather had employed her grandfather, he owned something. When her father died 2 years past, Ruiz had called in what he said were debts, put her to work in the house. When she tried to leave last spring, he'd had her brought back. When she tried again 4 months ago, he'd locked the room. She'd gotten out through a window. She'd been moving north for 6 days. I listened to all of it without interrupting. Some stories need to be told in one piece. You break them up and you lose something. Some thread the person needs to pull all the way through to get to the other side of it. When she was done, I said, "How far are you trying to go?" "Far enough," she said. "I have a cousin in Tucson." Tucson was 4 days north, maybe 3 if you pushed. "You can stay here tonight," I said. "I'll think on the rest." That was how it started. The riders came back like I'd said. Late afternoon, the flat-faced man and just one of the younger ones this time. I was out by the fence line, mending a section that didn't especially need mending, but gave me a reason to be visible and ordinary looking. He rode up and stopped. "Didn't find her at the creek," he said. "Didn't expect you would," I said. Coyote was long gone by then. He looked at the house. "You mind if I look around your place?" I kept my hands on the fence wire. "I do mind," I said. "You're welcome to ride back and come at me with a judge's paper. Short of that, you're trespassing on my land, and I'd appreciate it if you turned your horse around." He didn't like that. Men like him never do. They're used to the world moving out of their way. "She's valuable property," he said. "Don Ruiz will compensate whoever helps us recover her." "I told you I didn't see her," I said. "You calling me a liar, you can do that too, but you'll want to think about where that goes." He looked at me for a long moment, then he turned and rode out. I went back to the fence, working the wire, not watching him go. Inside, Celia was making something on the wood stove. She'd found the flour and the lard, and she was making tortillas, moving around my kitchen like she'd been in it before. I stood in the doorway for a minute just watching that. A house sounds different when there's someone in it. "He'll send more men," she said, without turning around. "Probably," I said. "I don't want you to get hurt on account of me." I hung my hat on the peg by the door. "I've been hurt worse for less," I said. She glanced back at me then. Just a quick look, but there was something in it, some reassessment, like she was adjusting some number she'd been running in her head. We ate together that night. She was a good cook. Better than I'd been doing for myself, which wasn't saying much since I'd been eating the same 4 things on rotation for 3 years. We talked some. Not about Ruiz, not about Tucson. She asked me how long I'd been here, and I told her. She asked where I'd been before, and I gave her the short version, some years in the border country, some years further south, a long stretch of work that hadn't added up to much that you could hold in your hands. "But you stayed here," she said. "Something about the place," I said. I looked around at the walls, the lamp, the window. Didn't feel like I was supposed to leave. She nodded like she understood that. Maybe she did. I gave her the bedroom and slept in the front room, rolled in a blanket on the floor. I'd slept on worse. I lay there in the dark listening to the night sounds, the horses shifting in the corral, an owl somewhere south, the occasional far-off coyote, and I thought about what I was doing. The honest answer is I didn't think about it much. There are moments in a man's life where the right thing and the thing you do are the same thing, and you don't need to work it out. I'd seen enough of the other kind, the moments where a man talks himself into doing the wrong thing because the arithmetic seemed to favor it, and I'd learned to distrust that kind of thinking. She'd come to me in a bad spot. I had a loft full of hay and a gate between her and the men who wanted her. That was the whole equation. The next morning I took stock. I had enough provisions to add one person for a week without it hurting. The ranch could run itself for 3 or 4 days if I left it right. I'd done that before during roundup season, left everything set and come back to find it as I'd left it. The road to Tucson ran north, but the direct route would take her back across country Ruiz's men would be watching. There was another way, longer, but it ran through high country, ranch land mostly, places where a single rider could move without being on a main trail. I could get her there. I didn't tell her that first. I spent the morning working the ranch, thinking it through. She worked alongside me without being asked, fed the horses, filled the water trough, helped me stack the wood I'd been meaning to split. She didn't ask for work. She just saw what needed doing and did it. I noticed that. Around noon, I told her my thinking. She listened the whole way through, same as I'd listened to her. Then she said, "That's 4 days you'd be away from your place. The place will hold. And if Ruiz's men come back while you're gone, then they'll find an empty ranch," I said. "Not much for them there." She was quiet a minute. She was looking out across the pasture, at the same tree line she'd come over 2 mornings ago, and I could see her working through it, the risk to me, the risk to herself if she went alone, the distance, all of it. "Why?" she asked, not suspicious, just asking. "Because you asked me a question over a pitchfork and you asked it straight," I said. "And because the men chasing you are the kind of men that need to hear no from someone now and then." She looked at me then, straight on, the way she'd looked up from the base of that ladder. "All right," she said. We left before dawn the next day. I packed light, jerky hardtack, a small sack of dried beans, a coffee pot, my rifle in its scabbard on the roan, my pistol on my hip. I gave Celia my spare horse, a gray mare named Colette who had a good walk and wouldn't spook it much. She settled into the saddle like someone who'd ridden before. Another thing I noted. The first day we stayed off the main trail entirely, moving through a long valley that ran parallel to the road about 2 miles east. It was slow going in places, creek crossings, brushy draws, but we moved without being seen by anything except cattle and one curious hawk that followed us for half a mile. We made camp at dusk in a stand of cottonwoods along a bend in the creek. She built the fire. I tended the horses. We ate beans and coffee and didn't talk much, but it was the comfortable kind of quiet, not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where 2 people have gotten enough of each other's measure that silence doesn't need filling. "You've done this before," she said, "moving through country without roads." "Border years," I said. She nodded. She'd understood what that meant without me elaborating. Second day we climbed into higher country, cedar breaks, rocky ground, the air cooling as we went up. This was the kind of terrain where a horse needed to pick its own footing and a rider needed to let it. Celia let the gray do her work, sat quiet, gave the mare her head on the rocky stretches. I rode behind and watched how she handled the rough spots, and what I saw was a woman who had been in difficult places before and had learned the first lesson difficult places teach. Don't fight what you can't change, and pay attention to what you can. We stopped midday to rest the horses at a spring I knew from years back, a cold, clean seep coming out of a limestone shelf, good grass around it, shade. I let the horses drink and we sat on the rock in the shade, and I drank from my canteen and she ate a piece of the hardtack, and for a while neither of us said anything. "My father used to say," she started, then stopped. "Go ahead." She looked at the water coming out of the rock. "He used to say that a person who helps you when they don't have to, that's the only kind of help worth having." I didn't say anything to that. "He was right," she said. I screwed the cap back on my canteen. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was, a pause. He would have liked you, I think. I don't know why that landed the way it did. Not soft, not sentimental. More like something solid touching down. A man who spent a good portion of his life being the person nobody thought twice about. You get to a place where you stop expecting to be liked or respected or thought well of by anyone. You do your work. You keep your word. You move through the world as straight as you can. And you stop waiting for anyone to notice, because that way you don't get tired of waiting. Her father would have liked me. I sat with that for a while. We made camp the second night in a shallow canyon, protected on two sides, good sight lines to the north. No fire, we were close enough to the main trail that smoke would carry. We ate cold and rolled in our bedrolls, and I took first watch, sitting with my back against the canyon wall, listening. The night was loud in the way empty country is loud. Wind, insects, the horses. Once, something moving through the brush to the south, too small to be a man, probably a deer or a javelina. I sat and let my eyes adjust and move across the darkness in slow sweeps, the way you learn to look in open country when you don't want to miss anything. Around midnight she came and sat beside me. I didn't ask why she wasn't sleeping. Some things don't need asking. How much further, she said. Day and a half, maybe a little more. She pulled her blanket around her shoulders. It was cold up in the canyon, the kind of cold that comes from stone. Do you think they're still looking? Men like that one, the heavy one, I said. They don't stop because it got inconvenient. They stop when it costs them more than she's worth. I paused. We've been out 2 days. By now looking for her is getting expensive. He might cut it loose. Or he might not. Or he might not, I agreed. She was quiet for a while. Then, what do you do after when you go back? Same as before, I said. Tend the place. Alone. Same as before, I said again. She looked at the dark. I could see her profile against the faint starlight, the line of her jaw, the way she was sitting, her back straight even when she was tired. I'll come back, she said. After I've seen my cousin, after I know I'm safe, I'll come back. I started to say something, some version of you don't owe me anything, and she cut me off, not sharply, just with a quiet certainty that didn't leave room for argument. Not because I owe you, she said, because I want to. I sat with that too. The third day we came down out of the high country and picked up a trail I knew that ran northeast, cutting toward the main road about 15 miles south of Tucson. We made good time on the easier ground. The horses were rested, the weather held, and we didn't see a soul until late afternoon when we passed a freight wagon going south, the driver giving us a nod as we went by. I felt something ease in my chest that I hadn't realized was coiled up tight. We made camp a final time that night on a flat bench above a dry wash, and the next morning I saw her into Tucson. Her cousin's name was Raphael. He met us at the edge of town. She'd sent word somehow, a boy with a message. I didn't ask how, and he was a solid-looking man in his 40s who took her hands and looked her over the way a man looks at family he'd been worried about. He looked at me over her shoulder and gave me a nod that said what it said. I gave her the gray mare for the trouble of returning her. She looked at me for a long moment when we said goodbye, standing there in the street with the morning sun coming over the rooftops, her bag over her shoulder, same as when she'd come over that rise 4 days back. No more running in her, though. The set of her was different now. Still. I meant what I said, she told me. I know, I said. I wasn't sure I believed she'd come back. I wasn't sure I had the right to believe it. A man doesn't protect a woman from one kind of claim and then let himself stake another. That would have been the same thing dressed in better clothes. So I rode back without building any pictures in my head about it. I did the 4-day ride back through the high country, tended the horses when I got in, checked the fence line in the morning, and went back to the work. Ruiz's man never came again. I don't know if the arithmetic finally broke the other way, or if someone with a judge's paper made it clear the border country was not his jurisdiction. Some things you don't need to understand to be glad of. The weeks passed the way weeks do when a man is working. She came back on a Tuesday morning in October, 7 weeks after I'd left her in Tucson. I was at the well when she rode in. Not the gray mare this time, a good bay gelding her own. I learned later that Raphael had helped her buy. She had a proper saddle and a bedroll tied behind it and the same bag over her shoulder. She rode up and stopped and looked down at me. I said I would, she said. You did, I said. I set down the bucket. She stepped down from the horse, and she just stood there for a moment, the two of us in the yard in the October sun, not saying anything, because there wasn't anything to say that hadn't already been said or understood. Then she took the horse's reins and walked him to the corral, unlatched the gate, led him in, and began undoing the saddle. I stood at the well and watched her work. There's a thing that happens sometimes in a man's life, not often, maybe once if he's lucky, where the world settles into a shape that fits. Not perfect. Nothing is perfect, but right. The way a gate hangs right when the hinges are properly set. The way a good tool sits in the hand like it was made for it. I picked up the bucket and went to fill the water trough. She had the saddle off by the time I got to the corral. She set it on the top rail and looked up at me when I came through the gate. Just looked at me steady, with those dark eyes that didn't miss much and didn't give away more than she intended. I'll start on the kitchen, she said. I could use the help, I said. She smiled at that, small reel, not for anyone else. I put the water down for the horse and she walked to the house, and I stood there another minute in the corral with the sun on my back and the sounds of the ranch all around me, the horses, the birds, the wind moving the dry grass, and I thought that this was mine. All of it. The work and the land and the woman walking to my kitchen like she belonged there, because she'd decided she did. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody handed it over. I'd stood between her and the men who wanted her. I'd put her on a horse and moved through hard country and brought her to safety and come home alone and done the work and waited without expecting. And she'd come back. That was the whole of it. That was everything. I latched the corral and walked to the house.